If I bleed tonight, if I am sad tonight, I don't have a job to find. And if I work tonight, I'm so tired tonight, I'll fall asleep when I'm home.
Hey everybody, and welcome to episode number 4 of the Power Slam podcast here on Inside the Ropes. I'm Kenny McIntosh, joined as always by, there wouldn't be a Power Slam podcast without this guy. He is the former editor of Power Slam magazine and the author of the Power Slam ebook series, Finn Martin. Finn, how's it going?
Very well, Kenny. How are you doing? I bet you're glad to be back home.
Oh my god, I don't ever want to go to a festival ever again. I was in this this is not a great way to start, but fuck it, why not? So we were in this VIP area of download, and I was like, VIP, apparently it's called glamping, which is what people call it. It's just like glamour camping or something. I thought that's for me, because I don't want to go camping. And we have this really nice tent that's like on a raised platform, so there's no mud, and it's all great. But no matter which toilet you tried to go to, there was shit all over it, no matter which one. And I am not really a fan of that, so it was about 3 or 4 days of where can I go for a pee and not have to hold my breath the entire time? The answer is nowhere. So I'm glad to be home. I'm glad to be be able to go for a shower where it's not 5 seconds of hot water followed by 25 seconds of cold. So yeah, good to be home. And I bet you're just sitting there at Power Slam HQ, just kind of with your feet up, just kind of listening to my woes, like, "Oh, Kenny, you silly man."
Yeah, well, I was in Scouts and Venture Scouts throughout my teens, and I totally overdosed on camping back then. And I don't ever intend to go camping ever again. So, I mean, glamping, it sounds better than camping, but the description you've just relayed to the world, Kenny, has put me off that for life as well. So, you've been the guinea pig there. You've been and given it the test run. Yep. And I'm going to take your advice, and I'm not going to bother with that either. Well, anyway, let's get on with the wrestling.
Get on with wrestling. But it's funny. Before we came on air, we were just chatting about different things we might talk about, and we were talking about pay-per-views, and because I'd forgotten the name of Extreme Rules very briefly. And I thought before we kick off and talk about, Extreme Rules and the fallout and last week's TV, because obviously this podcast is a few days late because I was at download, I do apologise, but the Wi-Fi was horrendous. Like my 3G signal didn't even work, so there was just no way to get it done. But we are here now, and we'll have another one out on Friday, as usual. But anyway, I was thinking before we talk about the current pay-per-views, you were covering wrestling when it was like when WWE had the big 4: Royal Rumble, WrestleMania, SummerSlam, Survivor Series, and then they introduced the In Your House shows, which meant it went up to one a month.
Yes.
What was the reaction like for you and from fans of it going to one a month? Because now we're kind of like, oh god, I wish there was a little bit fewer of them.
Yeah, it was a worrying time. I mean, it was lots of speculation about, is it going to be overkill? Are they going to just put too much product out there? And the thing is, the first In Your House, which was in May of 1995, that was, I think, headlined by Diesel versus Sid. It was a sort of mediocre show, as I recall. That did pretty well. But the novelty, you could say the novelty wore off quite quickly. And by the time they got to In Your House 4, which featured the famous Davey Boy Smith versus Diesel main event, which had the non-finish to set up the Diesel versus Bret Hart match at Survivor Series 1995. By then, the pay-per-view numbers had basically halved from what they started at in May. So the theory was at the time was, it's unsustainable. We can't have monthly pay-per-views. However, jump to the Attitude Era, really late 97 when WWF started making its big comeback after a year of rebuilding throughout 97. You jump to the Attitude Era and they certainly could get away with promoting monthly pay-per-views. And I think it was because WWF in 95 was in a weakened state, didn't really have the talent to be able to pull it off. So it wasn't so much that it was too much, it was just they didn't have the people to make it work. Here we are now, and sometimes we've got a pay-per-view each fortnight. And, do they have the talent to pull it off? Well, they've got a lot more talent, as in big name talent, than they had in that. Well, I guess they've got access to more big name talent than they had in 1995. I think monthly pay-per-views, no one would be complaining if they were doing that now. I mean, doing pay-per-views every 2 weeks. I mean, even if let's just say they had loads more talent than they do today, I still think that would be too much because there's only so much that people can digest. I think it's really that simple.
And I guess going on that, what did you think of Extreme Rules overall before we get into specifics?
I enjoyed the show, but it did fall into the trap of what I just mentioned a moment ago. Is it didn't really feel that special because we're just getting bombarded with so much product right now. I mean, you look at the actual quality of the matches, and most of them were enjoyable. I mean, even the Noam Dar, Alicia Fox versus Rich Swann and Sasha Banks match, that got a good response, and that was just a throwaway filler match, and I thought that went down well on the night. So I mean, most of the matches, with the notable exception of Alexa Bliss versus Bayley.
I was ready to jump in there and go, you can't have thought that was great. But yeah, that was, my God.
And obviously the Hardys versus Cesaro and Sheamus, the rules of that were all very perplexing. But I mean, the action I thought was enjoyable there also. So I mean, as a show, I thought it delivered well in terms of in-ring action, but the storyline support really wasn't there because, nothing right now in WWE, with I guess the possible exception of Samoa Joe versus Brock Lesnar, feels essential, feels must see.
Do you think it's safe to say? Is it safe to say they're kind of keeping their cards close to their chest for the sort of SummerSlam build, and everything until then is kind of just coasting a wee bit?
They could well be, yeah. I mean, they're in this position now where, the WWE Network, they've got everyone's money, so there isn't that huge pressure to promote each event as must-see, which is, of course, they had back in 1995 when they were there with the In Your House events. There was a real drive with each episode of Raw to try to persuade the viewers to spend the money on the next event because, the promotion... everyone knows this, but I'm going to say it anyway. The promotion was key to making the event attract more pay-per-view orders. I mean, and of that combined, of course, with a juicy main event or a juicy series of matches, we're in a position right now where there doesn't really seem to be that much emphasis on the promotion because WWE has already got the fans' money. So that's why that combined with the proliferation of events is why the events don't feel as special as they once did because, there isn't really that. The WWE doesn't really feel that, to me, like it's motivated to say to its audience, you must see this, you must order this. This is a can't miss event because they've already got the money in the bank. And of course it's money in the bank this Sunday.
What I feel you set that up. That was too well thought out. And I guess, for me, when I was watching, Extreme Rules. So I'm one of these people, obviously, doing podcasts and covering different things, you tend to read a lot of kind of insider information, so you maybe have an idea of where a lot of things are going, in storyline sense. But the new kind of spoiler that seems to just be ruining any form of enjoyment that I have of not knowing what's going to happen is the booking odds for shows, because now if the bookies come in with someone in the day of a show who's going to win the main event, they pretty much are, because Randy Orton won the Royal Rumble. That came out of the bookies, I think about the afternoon of the Rumble.
Yes, I remember that.
And Samoa Joe, he became the favourite the day of the show. Nobody had thought he was going to win before that. I think everybody kind of thought it was going to be Finn Balor or Seth Rollins.
Hold on a second there, Kenny. I predicted it was either going to be Seth Rollins or Samoa Joe. I think that's what I said.
You did, but most other people were not predicting it. They were not predicting Samoa Joe, but he did win. He did go on to win the 5-way. Were you surprised that they decided to go with Joe? And what did you think of the match? And because this was really his first star-making performance on the main roster, I think.
I would agree with that. Yes. I mean, I enjoyed the match. It reminded me quite a lot of a Money in the Bank match in that people would just disappear for long periods. Because we're in this age now where people don't really sell that much. And yet in these matches, guys are like selling things for minutes at a time. And that will happen in the Money in the Bank matches, plural, this Sunday. People will just disappear and then they'll come back like several minutes later. So I found that to be, I wouldn't say that was weird because in a sense it's essential because you can't have 5 guys in the ring all at once. You've got to let people do their thing. But it kind of feels a bit weird in the modern era where guys don't really sell moves anymore and then they're selling something for literally minutes. So again, a necessary evil to make that match work. I mean, I enjoyed it. I mean, Samoa Joe to me seemed like the joint favourite with Seth Rollins, as I said in our previous recording, because the Samoa Joe Brock Lesnar match hasn't been done before, and it seems like a pretty good match. I mean, what kind of ruined it for me was I didn't see Roman Reigns winning because I think most people know that Reigns versus Brock Lesnar is the long-term plan for WrestleMania next year, which in a sense kind of spoils Lesnar versus Samoa Joe at Great Balls of Fire because it's hard for me to believe that Samoa Joe is going to beat Lesnar knowing that plan is already in place. But overall, I enjoyed the match. I thought it was a good night for Samoa Joe. Some people didn't do as well as others, but not everyone can excel or come out of a match strong. And it's given us this match which we haven't seen, which, as I said earlier, is about the only thing in WWE right now that feels must see.
And then that led us into the Samoa Joe putting the coquina clutch on Paul Heyman last week, which I thought was a really strong segment and really sort of like out of the gate showed you that, Samoa Joe's not just going to be treated like a regular opponent of Brock Lesnar. He's being treated like a real threat. And I thought that was clever to do because you don't see Paul Heyman. I mean, as far as I'm aware, the only times that Paul Heyman has got physically involved was when it was the Triple H feud and he got slapped, or the Goldberg feud where he got speared. Apart from that, he doesn't get physically involved. So I think it's effective to do that with him sporadically.
I absolutely agree. Yes, absolutely agree. And it's very important as well that Joe looks strong, just to try and offset that sort of knowledge or theory or belief that people have that Joe is a full-timer. This is the whole thing about the full-timers versus part-timers debate. We had Goldberg come in last year and he shocked the world when he beat Lesnar as a part-timer. But if you're a full-timer, it seems like somebody who's there every week and somebody that theoretically you can build the company around long-term. He, in the fans' minds, seems less likely to beat a part-timer. But that's a situation they've created for themselves over the last 6 years. So I thought it was very intelligent of WWE, very smart of WWE to book the angle that you've just described on the post-Extreme Rules Raw, and also on Raw last night. We'll no doubt be talking about this week's Raw a little bit more in our next podcast. Joe came out as the aggressor and went for Lesnar in the angle which opened last night's Raw. And again, that is absolutely essential, in my opinion, to make people believe that Joe really might have a chance, even though I think deep down we all know he doesn't have a chance.
Yeah, and I think that, we will touch upon some of the things on later this week, like what is Roman Reigns' SummerSlam announcement going to be, and John Cena's now a free agent. There's all these things, but I think the segment they did last night with Brock Lesnar and Samoa Joe, I think they knocked it out of the park. I couldn't. if you asked me to sit down and write something better, I don't know that I could. I thought that Joe and I think that the great nod that they had, I don't know if you picked up on this, was Samoa Joe's most famous feud he ever had in TNA with Kurt Angle started with a headbutt, and that's what he did with Brock Lesnar. I thought it was a really nice nod to the people who followed his career for a long time, and I think the important thing was that he got the better of Brock at points, and he didn't seem scared by him at all, and I think those were just great nuances of it that needed to happen in order for Joe to like you say, even go into this standing a chance.
Yeah, I wonder what effect this will have on the bookies' odds.
Yeah. I wonder.
They know better. They know what's coming.
They do. It's a sad state of affairs. I try and avoid Twitter now for about 5 hours before every show, just in case.
Yeah, definitely. It is. That is the new spoiler, isn't it? The bookies' odds. With Joe, it's. I thought the Joe Kurt Angle pull-aparts in TNA were a lot better than the Joe Lesnar pull-apart last night, if I'm honest. Mm-hmm. Some people might not want to hear that, but I thought the Joe Angle pull-aparts in TNA in 2006 were absolutely breathtaking. Like some of the most amazing things ever. And that first match they had, which I believe was at Genesis, it was the November 2006 pay-per-view. Was it November 2006? I think that's right.
I'll be honest, you could pay me £1,000 and I wouldn't be able to get it right.
Yeah. Well, he came in 2006. They had the angle at TV, then they had another angle at Bound for Glory, and then I'm sure they had the first pay-per-view match was at the November pay-per-view for TNA, and that did really well on pay-per-view, and it was an incredible match. If you've never seen that one is the intensity, your suspension of disbelief. You don't need to bother with that. It just happens. You can believe that match. So I think if Joe and Lesnar can get to, say, 75% of the intensity of that match, I'm really looking forward to Great Balls of Fire. That'll be something to see.
How do you feel about Brock Lesnar right now? Because I think there was a lot of fans before the Goldberg thing in November. 2016 was probably his worst year in WWE in terms since his return, because he comes out of the gate. There's the Bray Wyatt feud that they're kind of kicking off with. Then they scrap that. Then he has the thing with Dean Ambrose, which was a big letdown at WrestleMania.
Yeah.
He does the thing with Randy Orton at SummerSlam, which a lot of people didn't like. Some people did. And it was only really the Goldberg thing that kind of gave him something different, to get squashed. What do you think about Brock Lesnar now in 2017? Has him winning the Universal title and then, now the thing with Samoa Joe, is that starting to rejuvenate Brock a little bit, do you think?
He did seem far more interested on Raw last night, there's no doubt about that. Although I'm kind of wondering if that was because instead of going on at the end of hour 1 or hour 2, he was going on first, so that meant he could then leave early. Maybe that was the cause of his enthusiasm. All those complaints about him in 2016, I've written that, I've stated that. Just apathetic. The Ambrose match at WrestleMania last year was it was just an embarrassment, really. The fact that Ambrose called him out about it on the Steve Austin podcast, say no more. He broke ranks and said that he was met by laziness when they were putting the match together and he wanted to do so much more. And I really felt like it was a huge setback for Dean Ambrose, that match. He just feels like he so many sort of half-hearted performances. When he was appearing at the side of Paul Heyman, he didn't really seem that interested about being there. Really disappointed by nearly everything he did last year, really. He put Goldberg over, of course, but really what did that achieve in the long run? It gave him a program at least, and it maybe encouraged some lapsed fans to come back and order the WWE Network, probably for free, to watch WrestleMania. But I don't really know what that feud accomplished in the long run. It was more like it was something that they did to give him something to do. Maybe the Samoa Joe feud will inspire him. He did seem a lot more interested last night. I hope it does. I believe this will be his last year in WWE. His contract, he signed a 3-year contract just before WrestleMania 2015, it would have been, wouldn't it?
Yeah, WrestleMania 31, yeah.
That's right. So I believe this current contract will expire. He'll drop the belt to whomever, probably Roman Reigns at WrestleMania. And I think that'll probably be it for Lesnar by then. He turns 40 this year. I'm not really sure what else they can do with him. Although I will say, and there's something I haven't said yet about the Samoa Joe Lesnar angle feud match. This is what Lesnar should be doing. He should be working with full-time guys and attempting to bring them up to his level. And the whole machine, as we saw last night, the machine really did a lot to help here with the layout of the angle. The machine should be trying to educate us to believe that this full-time guy is at the level of this part-time guy. And I'm really hoping that it's a very competitive match and that Samoa Joe, even in defeat at Great Balls of Fire, because I can't see him winning, even in defeat, I hope he really comes out of this massively enhanced and that they don't drop the ball after this opening angle and just let him become, just another guy. I mean, that's the last thing I want to see. And that really, hopefully that will be Lesnar's legacy from this point forward, he'll erase memories of his, indifferent 2016 and really bring it, really deliver and really try and give the guys that are hanging around full time, a leg up, a hand up and make them into bigger stars than they currently are. That's what I want to see Lesnar do from this point forward. Will he do it? Well, we're just going to have to wait and see. I think Great Balls of Fire will be a good indicator of what's to come.
Yeah, I feel like Brock would happily resign and keep doing what he's doing, but I think the problem is going to be the money.
Yeah,
of what are they going to pay him? But at the same time, the difference now is that if Brock wants to keep making money, there's not really anywhere else for him to go and do it now. So I do wonder if I can't remember exactly what it is he's on, if it's like $5 million a year or something like that. But if they offer him half that, I don't know if he takes it, but maybe he does. Vince loves him. It's the easiest schedule in the world. So I hope he sticks around because I feel like there's not really that many matches that have the Brock Lesnar aura about them. But like you say, the good thing is that this year he now seems to be working with full-time guys. Samoa Joe, rumours of the Finn Balor and Seth Rollins and the Braun Strowman matches. At least we're getting to see him against other guys that need that push rather than guys like Undertaker or Triple H. So coming out of Extreme Rules for the Raw brand, was there anything on last week's Raw that kind of stuck out to you for either good or bad reasons?
I thought the Bray Wyatt versus Roman Reigns opener was a really good match. I mean, let's face it, most people would rather like extract one of the molars with a pair of pliers than give Roman Reigns any credit. But I thought that was a really good opening match. I thought it was super hot. I thought Bray Wyatt's promo prior to it was just bewildering. He said last night was the beginning of the end. They took a sword and stuck it right into my heart, but I am still here, still alive, still a god. He said he was going to save us from damnation. I mean, I don't know what Bray Wyatt means. I don't think I've understood a Bray Wyatt promo for a couple of years. I thought that was a particularly out there one. And the sad thing about Bray Wyatt's promos is that he delivers them with such conviction that if they gave him something to say that was going to, resonate or take him somewhere or mean something, I think he might actually get somewhere, Kenny.
Yeah, but the thing is, he never. It's like, I'll give you an example. There was a guy in my school when I was growing up, and he knew a lot about wrestling, so you could always have a chat about wrestling. And this was the days of the Hasbro figures had just finished, like maybe a year before, whatever. And he said that he had a Waylon Mercy Hasbro figure, and I knew, being the geek that I am, that they never released a Waylon Mercy Hasbro. Stop talking rubbish. But he was determined that he had one, but he would never show me that he had it. So I knew he was lying. That's what I feel like with Bray Wyatt promos now. I know you're lying! I know that you're lying! I know you're not a god, I know you're not... I know you don't hold any power, and so if I don't believe you, then what's the point, And like you say, he's great at delivering the promos, but it's just the content is never believable. It's never believable. And then he comes out after these pay-per-views and says these things, and I find myself just kind of bored now, which is such a shame.
Yeah, I agree. And also, crucially, he never wins the big match.
Never.
Or if he beat Randy Orton in the House of Horrors match after Jinder Mahal interfered.
And the Singh brothers.
Pardon me?
And the Singh brothers. They needed 3 people.
Oh, of course, yeah, absolutely. But the thing is, that meant nothing, because the feud, in a sense, it was kind of, the feud was over because he'd already lost the title. So, okay, he won that match, but, most people just want to forget that match ever happened. And because of the frequency with which pay-per-views occur, matches occur, chances are a lot of people have forgotten that it even happened. So that's the thing with Wyatt as well. He never wins the matches that matter. So it's really hard to get behind him, or really. I always felt like he was a guy, and you tell me what you give me your opinion on this, Kenny, once I've finished. I always felt that Bray might have been a guy that could have done well as a babyface.
Oh yeah, 100%. Well, there's the example of last year, right, where right after WrestleMania 32, he kind of went babyface for the night, and he teamed with Roman Reigns, and people just loved him, and then he got injured. So yeah, there's that prime example is there. People wanted to see it, people wanted to cheer him, and I think that down the line, isn't it funny that all people want to see is Roman Reigns as a heel and Bray Wyatt as a babyface,
and they won't give it to us,
and they won't give either of them to us. I think that. I think it was also quite... I know it was obviously because Matt Hardy's wife had given birth, but I think keeping them off TV last week and keeping, Finn Balor off and stuff is good. I like the idea that sometimes losses have a little bit of a consequence for wrestlers. It's something that I enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. One thing that Booker said during the Bray Wyatt versus Booker T on commentary, of course, during the Bray Wyatt versus Roman Reigns match, was he said Cole asked Booker how important the match was to Wyatt and Reigns, and Booker said that of course it was very important because one guy would go up and another would go down. Well, that didn't I'm not really sure whether that's going to happen, but if it did, I think the wins and losses, which is something that I've complained about previously, wins and losses not meaning things. I think if we could clearly see that there was consequences to Wyatt's loss and benefits to Reigns' win, I think wins and losses would mean a lot more than they do. And it didn't really seem to matter who won that match, really, because Wyatt was still out there. Later on, he was the one that caused the distraction to Seth Rollins, didn't he? And Seth Rollins then lost the main event. And then on this week's Raw, we had a Rollins versus Wyatt confrontation. So it still really feels like Wyatt is, a top near the top of the card guy. So the fact he lost to Roman Reigns on last week's Raw really didn't matter.
Yeah, it's he just seems to always be there in a kind of semi-main position. We'll talk a lot about SmackDown and the lead up to Money in the Bank on Thursdays. We always record on Thursdays, which is why I'm going to probably always say Thursdays, but you guys get it on Fridays. We'll talk about SmackDown for the most part there and the build to Money in the Bank. But you've had a chance to watch, I've not had a chance to see it yet, but you've had a chance to watch Omega Okada II, the second in the series of Kazuchika Okada and Kenny Omega. People are raving about the match. How does it stack up to the first one?
I didn't think it was as good as the first one, but I still thought it was an incredible match. To me, it wasn't an immediate gratification match. The first half, you had to persevere with it. There was a lot of slow moments in there, and you could tell that the crowd sensed that this match was going along. It was slightly spoilt for me because I'd seen the result before I watched it and get around to watching it until yesterday. So I knew it was going to a draw. But it was as if the crowd knew it was going to go to go to a draw because they didn't really seem that responsive in the first half. Also, you could say, of course, that the whole match layout was designed to get that reaction so they would be piping hot for part 2. Particularly the last 12 minutes of the match were explosive. That was when the fireworks went off. I mean, it was a heck of a match, heck of a finale. The thing I like about these guys is the precision. I mean, I think about 3 minutes from the end, they did this perfect German suplex. And as you know, Kenny, a German suplex, and not that either you or Kenny and I are wrestlers, of course, but because Kenny understands this, to do a German suplex, that's like a 2-man job, isn't it? Both guys each guy has to really help the other on that move.
Yep.
And if someone's, a little bit off on it we've seen it all the time when people do German suplexes and they just sort of collapse or they don't look good. And it was just absolutely spot on. And you think these guys have been going at it for 57 minutes and that still looks perfect. And just the precision on Okada's drop kicks, and how Kenny Omega does those knee strikes without killing his opponent, I do not know. And there are a lot of mysteries about wrestling, not a lot, but still a few mysteries about wrestling that I would prefer to be mysteries to me, because that enhances my enjoyment of the business. And when I'm watching that, I still want to suspend my disbelief. It's like if I go and see a movie, I want to believe this movie. I know it's not real, but I want to believe it. And it's the same with wrestling. And I feel that the match was amazing. If you have not seen this match, you need to watch it. But be warned, it's a 1-hour match, and that first half of the match is really the setup for the explosive second half. So you might, if you're a big Dolph Ziggler fan or something like that, you're not going to be given constant stimulation in that first match. But what they're doing is they're setting up part 2, and it will be worth it in the end. I know you're going to watch it, Kenny, aren't you? And I know you're looking forward to it as well.
Yeah, 100%. I'm not, I'll be honest, I'm not a New Japan guy that consumes all the stuff. It's just not really my thing, but I really loved the first match. I really want to watch this one. I've also been told that I need to check out Okada and Minoru Suzuki from a couple of months ago, so I'm going to try and check that out this week as well. And hopefully this, Omega Okada 2 is not the borefest 60 minutes that was the 60-man Iron Man match at WrestleMania 12, which whenever I can get the chance to say that I thought that was boring, I do like to take that opportunity.
I absolutely agree with you there, Kenny. Absolutely
terrible.
That was a match. It was just nothing happened.
It was just we can go 60 minutes. Great. Can you go 60 minutes and make it be good? Can we aim for that next?
It's just, if you read Bret Hart's autobiography, and I'm not going to rail on Bret Hart on this because I've taken a lot of flack over the years for railing on Bret Hart, for really knocking him unnecessarily. If you read his autobiography, he's adamant that was an outstanding match. And the fact that people were, I think it was the Arrowhead Pond it was held at in Anaheim. I think that's right, isn't it, Kenny?
Yeah, Anaheim Pond. Yeah.
There was people just leaving in droves during the match. And it was exciting at the end, but it was just like loads of headlocks and just nothing was happening.
If you put the first 10 minutes and the last 10 minutes together, very good stuff.
Yeah.
But because the thing is, it was the wrong crowd. It was a WWF crowd,
Yeah.
And going back to Omega and Okada, I am a big fan of Dave Meltzer's work. I read The Observer every week and I listen to some of his radio shows. And it's funny to me because you get a lot of people on Twitter who are very angry that he rates the New Japan stuff so highly. And he made Omega and Okada, the first one, 6 stars and all that sort of stuff. And it's but it's opinion based, That's his favourite style of wrestling, really. And that's fine. You can't. It's impossible to watch wrestling and critique it without having a slightly sort of preferential basis on when you watch it. You just can't. It's I couldn't sit and watch CZW and be completely unbiased because I hate that style of wrestling. So I just couldn't. But I think.
Well, of course, everyone's entitled. It's like for instance, there's another Transformers film coming out this month, and I think it's Michael Bay directing it. And the amount of critics that hate Michael Bay's movies is unbelievable. His Transformers movies, I think, apart from the first one, have all been panned by virtually all critics. But the public loves these movies. I think the last one did like something like $1 billion at the box office. So, I mean, you've got the public there that is willing to support these, so they're going to continue to get made, and the critics hate them. So, who's right, Kenny? It's the same with wrestling, is that if one person thinks something fabulous and a fan doesn't, well, your opinion really counts as much as the reviewer's in many ways. Because if you don't agree with that reviewer, then your opinion is all that really matters to you. So you're right, it's all opinion based. It's not like a mathematical equation. There's a right and wrong answer. It's an opinion thing. And if you like it, great. And if you don't watch it. Let's face it, Kenny, in this day and age, there's no shortage of wrestling out there for you. You should be able to find something you like.
Yeah, and if you can't, the network's got tons of stuff from the past, so you're all good. And it's funny. I think that I was yesterday when I was coming home from download, I had a lot of time spent in the airport, so I ended up picking up the Fight and Spirit magazine because it was in WH Smith. I thought I'd go and pick it up, and there was a really, really good interview that Brian Elliott did with Kenny Omega.
That's right, yeah, Kenny Omega.
And it's interesting because he was asked by Brian about, was this rematch too soon? And he said he thinks it was. He said
really?
He said that he would have preferred to have not done it for a long time because he knows the comparison that people are going to make so soon to the first one. And I thought I was really impressed that he said that, because even though he went out and, by all accounts, I've not seen it, so I don't want to put words, I don't want to say it yet, but I'm sure I trust your opinion enough that if the second half picks up as much as you say it does, that it's well worth a watch. But for him to still come out and say, well, actually, I still think it should have happened later on down the line, I admire that honesty, and I like hearing stuff like that. So.
Definitely, yeah. I haven't read that interview yet. I absolutely intend to buy the magazine and read the interview. Haven't done yet. Haven't been into town for a few days, so that's an interview I'm very much looking forward to reading.
So as we kind of wind down a little bit on this episode, we did have a fan question last week from Chris McIntyre. It's very funny to me because I'm only just over my sort of fanboying moments with Finn of like, oh my god, I'm speaking to Finn Martin and we're talking about wrestling and all this sort of stuff. But you get people now who are going, Finn Martin read my question. So it's funny to me like that people are now getting to have that reaction, because a lot of people grew up with reading the magazine and getting to. And I remember, I'll give you a brief one. My mum used to give me so much shit. She'd be like, she calls me Kenneth, and she'd be like, Kenneth, why is there a £7 phone call on the bill? And I'd go, what do you mean? And she'd go, you phoned that fucking Power Slam hotline again, haven't you? And I'd go, well, I'm sorry. It was in the magazine. And I always remember there was one that because I'd never heard your voice before. And then I heard your voice in the Power Slam hotline. And I always, for whatever reason, remember the week that there'd been a taped Raw, and you were telling people on the hotline about the return of the Big Boss Man as part of the corporation.
Wow.
And I was...
That 98, I guess that would have been, wouldn't it?
Yeah, 98. And I almost fell off my chair. The Big Boss Man's back? And, but yeah, the memories we have. But anyway, Chris McIntyre had a question.
Well, thanks very much for calling the hotline, Kenny. It was some good years. That phone line. I mean, as I wrote in Pro Wrestling Through the Power Slam years, my first ebook, that phone line propped up Superstars of Wrestling and Power Slam for quite a few years. And I've thanked people who called that hotline many times before, and you were the people that kept that magazine going until it really started doing well in 97. So thank you, everyone who rang the hotline.
There you go. I'll wait for my reimbursement check in the mail. But Chris McIntyre had a question, Finn, that you wanted to tackle, so take it away.
Yeah, Chris McIntyre has asked, what's our favourite wrestler and moment of all time? Well, we're just going to do the wrestler part this time, and we'll do the moment another time. I think it's a very difficult question to answer, because it's very much like, what's your favourite film? What's your favourite band? And it varies on where you are in your life. I mean, I'm sure you would agree with that, Kenny. It's like, what's your favourite band? Well, when you're 20, it's probably very different to what your favourite band is when you're 25 or 30.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about, I've got two answers, because I feel like if I give the first answer, people are going to, be very upset about it. If I'm honest, my favourite of all time is Hulk Hogan. I can't help it. It's just he's the guy that got me into wrestling. You know, I loved watching that time period of sort of the late 80s into, you know, 92, 93. I have a very, very guilty pleasure of WrestleMania 9. I'm not ashamed of it.
I've never heard anyone say that before.
Oh, honestly, like, I think it's because that was my first. Now, in the UK, people who used to watch WWF remember this. The pay-per-views at one point were on Sky Movies Gold. I still don't understand why, but they were. And WrestleMania 9 was my first sort of, like, in real time WrestleMania. You know, like WrestleMania 8 I'd seen a couple of weeks later through like a tape, but WrestleMania 9 was my first one that I got to see like the next day. And when you're like 8 years old and they're all dressed in togas and there's two doinks and there's Giant Gonzalez and there's chloroform, like, that's great when you're like 8 years old, you know. I mean, I can only imagine that you and Dave Meltzer were probably, you know, pouring yourself the largest glass of vodka available to get through it. But you know, you can't help what you like as a kid, and I don't think there's ever been there's never been a wrestler who I've had as much of an emotional attachment to as Hogan, and you know, watching him in the NWO. You know, people can say what they want about the politics and all that's another conversation, but you know, the moments that he created, things like, you know, the match with Goldberg in the Georgia Dome, or when he came back to WWF and they had the match with The Rock at WrestleMania 18, even the matches with like Vince at WrestleMania 19, he always managed to emotionally attach me to things. So in terms of just overall, it's got to be him. But I thought I'd bring another answer to the table because I felt like people might want one for actual wrestling reasons, as opposed to just my favourite. And probably my favourite wrestler would have to be Bret Hart.
Okay, I thought you were going to say that, even though you just knocked his match with Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 12.
But you know what it is? For me with Bret, he always, to me, wrestled in a realistic style. And I always connected to that more. Like, you know, you remember he would do that thing where somebody would like launch him into the turnbuckle and he would just go in like chest first and fall back like he'd just been shot. Yeah. He would do things like that, and I just always thought that he was more believable than like a Shawn Michaels. And Bret was. I could go back and watch Bret Hart matches all day, so he would be mine. But I'm very curious to yours. I have no unearthly idea who you're going to say.
I mean, I've put Hogan over many times as a worker, and certainly as I've got older, I appreciate him a lot more for what he did and what he brought to the business. As far as, you know, everyone knocked him for not being a particularly exciting performer in the ring. Of course, he wasn't. But I mean, he had a match worked out, and it was a very successful match that people wanted to pay to watch. And as far as, you're right, just bringing those fans into the ring. And you mentioned earlier the famous match with The Rock from WrestleMania in 2002. And you really felt like The Rock was at the top of his game at that point. Maybe he was slightly past the top of his game, because I mean, he already had an eye on becoming an idea. He'd done the cameo in The Mummy Returns by then, so I think he already had an eye on leaving to become a full-time actor. So maybe he was slightly past his peak as a performer. But when you saw The Rock and Hogan in the ring, you just saw who the master was immediately, when Hogan just took over and just stole Rock's thunder. And of course, it was unprofessional. Hogan went into the match as the heel and Rock was supposed to be the face, and Hogan just reversed the roles. So, I mean, if you were The Rock, then you're going to be thinking, oh no, what have I got myself into? And I fully believe that that's a big part of the reason why Steve Austin didn't wrestle him at that event, because he sensed that something like that might happen. And instead, Austin was in that completely worthless match with Scott Hall on the undercard. But I feel that Austin didn't trust Hogan, and thought that there might be some chicanery afoot. And sure enough, there was. So you look at the ability of Hogan to do that, and it's just uncanny how good he was at doing that, regardless of whether or not it was good or bad for business. And there are umpteen examples of times where Hogan has acted for the betterment of himself. I mean, look at the SummerSlam 2005 match with Shawn Michaels, where Shawn had to turn emergency heel and did like some incredible work in the run up to that match with Hogan, where he did that emergency heel turn. And that was just an amazing period of WWE TV at the time, because you didn't really know what was going to happen. And it felt like Shawn Michaels had just been given a free rein to just do whatever the hell he wanted to. And he was blasting Hogan with all sorts of barbs. I think it was just a magical moment, really, to be a fan. Almost like going back to 97 at the height of the Shawn Michaels-Bret Hart feud, where you didn't really know what was going to happen because they really did dislike each other. It was almost like a repeat of that.
You almost forgot as well how great of a heel Shawn was.
Absolutely. I mean, he was just terrific. And then they had the match, and Hogan refused to have a rematch with Michaels, where he would return the favour. So Shawn went into the match and then did all that completely ridiculous overselling. And that in itself was just like, you can say, well, that shouldn't happen. That's unprofessional. Yeah, it is. But you go back and look at it and it's just like, this is just like incredible entertainment. Yep. This is just like spontaneous, you know. And that's the funny thing about wrestling, is that when something happens that isn't supposed to happen, we all say, oh, that's terrible. He deviated from the script. He's gone into business for himself. I've said all these things. He's unprofessional. But looking back on certain these things now, when it doesn't really matter about what the initial or the impact of that behaviour was in the short term afterwards, you can look back on it now and you can smile about it. So anyway, to answer the question, I suppose my favourite two wrestlers would really have to be, I guess, Misawa or Kenta Kobashi. I would say would have to be my two favourites of all time, because I just thought they were so amazing at what they did. I mean, to me, they were the two best wrestlers of the Power Slam years in terms of actually putting big matches together. And, you know, All Japan at its peak from say 92 through to about 96, 97. I mean, the main events there were just, I mean, there was no one else in the business, no other promotion in the business could put matches together like they could. Obviously there was really dire consequences of that, the damage the guys did to themselves, and sadly Misawa passed away in the ring. So there was a price to pay there, of course. But if we're looking at it purely from an entertainment standpoint as it was happening, I mean, those guys were to me, there was no one as good as Misawa, I guess, would be number one. Kobashi would be number two, and then Kawada would be number three. And those three guys were just, you know, outstanding. But I mean, as I've got older, Kenny, I've become a real big fan of wrestlers of the 70s and the early 80s who really put matches together with the slow build, where everything, you know, they're putting the matches together like jigsaws, where each piece locks into place, and everything supports everything else. Like guys like the Jack Briscoe or Harley Race, or Terry Funk from that era. Really become a big fan of those guys. Jerry Lawler, stuff from Memphis, and just the timing and just how over the guys were, because there was more suspension of disbelief then. So I've become a big fan of that. So it's hard for me to answer the question of who's my favourite wrestler of all time. And in fact, I haven't given you a specific wrestler, one person who's my favourite of all time, but I've given you some. I think it's like, what's your favourite film of all time? What's your favourite, you know, movie of all time, or whatever. It does change as you get older. And I think it should do, because I think your taste should change, and you should develop a new appreciation for things that you might not have liked when you were younger.
For sure. And excuse me.
Involvement. We've all got to evolve, Kenny.
We do. Evolve or perish, I think it was. Was that what Triple H's thing he said? Anyway. The last thing I was going to bring up very quickly before we kind of ride off into the podcast sunset for 48 hours before we come back is, I don't know if you know what today marks the 24-year anniversary of?
Would it be King of the Ring?
Yep, the first ever King of the Ring pay-per-view back in 1993 in Dayton,
that sounds
Ohio.
Right.
Any memories of that?
Yeah, that was Bret Hart's Night of Glory, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. That was his comeback. You know, he lost the belt to Yokozuna, then Hogan came in, impromptu match at WrestleMania 9, which everyone hated. It was actually the beginning of, even though on the night it was seen as a terrible night for the Hitman, it was actually the start of big things for him, because that really galvanized support for him amongst the grassroots fans, because they really felt like he'd been screwed over. Hogan got the heat for that. They really felt like the company and Hogan had really stolen his spot from him. But I mean, the truth was, at WrestleMania 9, Bret Hart didn't really feel like a top champion guy, a top level guy. He was a really good performer, but he didn't really have that aura or that respect. So by getting knocked down, I think he really earned a lot of support from people who felt that he'd been unjustly treated that night. So even though it was a terrible night for him on paper, it was actually the start of an incredible comeback. And King of the Ring, I think, was a huge part of that comeback, where people looked at this and said, wow, this guy, because I think his first match he wrestled, was it, he beat Bam Bam Bigelow in the final. I know he had a match with Mr. Perfect. And I think, did he have another match with Razor Ramon? Is that the 3 guys he beat?
Yeah. That's right.
That's right. And it was just 3 different matches that were all so exciting and so gripping, and so, you know, it was the Bret Hart classic. I don't see it in terms of a classic match, as in the classic Bret Hart performance, in that he put it together, really thought about it, and everything was done for a reason. So, I mean, it was a terrific night for him. And then that, of course, led to Jerry Lawler attacking him after Hart had become King of the Ring. And that really led to the feud of the year, Bret Hart versus Jerry Lawler, which was super hot, and a terrific time for Lawler as well, in that he, instead of being this annoying commentator and this, you know, nuisance, he became like a real player in the WWF system. So King of the Ring was a terrific pay-per-view. I'm sure most of the listeners have watched it. I've watched it quite a few times over the years, and I think it still holds up really well. I know Bret Hart's your favourite wrestler of all time, Kenny. I know you're a fan of that event.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, obviously, Hulk Hogan was robbed in the match with Yokozuna by the cameraman as well. So, you know, we'll put that out there as well. But in terms of nights for Bret Hart, that's one of his best. You know, especially, like you say, the 3 different styles of matches. I think my favourite is probably the Bam Bam Bigelow one. But that's, you know, it could probably change depending on when I've watched it and what I think at the time. But so Finn, before we go, where can people find you and you know, learn more about you or buy things related to you? Buy a Finn Martin 8x10 or whatever it is.
You can't buy one of them. You can find me at my new website, which is www.finleymartin.co.uk. That's got my books on there. I do a bi-weekly blog about various things, including wrestling. So you can find me there, finleymartin.co.uk. And where can people find you, Kenny?
Well, you can just find me on Twitter at KennyMC1985, and I'll still continue to hope that the person who took the Kenny McIntosh Twitter handle gives it back to me, so that I don't have to have the year of my birth there to remind me how old I'm getting all the time. And people can get you on Twitter as well at Finley Martin or Power Slam Online.
That's correct. Yes, they can. And please send those questions in, and we will answer them on future podcasts. Yeah,
for sure. We'll take some more questions on episode 5 later on this week. So thanks for listening, everyone. Sorry for the delay. Normal service has resumed, and we will speak to you soon.
If I bleed tonight, if I am sad tonight,